guys, how's it going? Welcome back to Sully's Models. So in this part of the series of making the 30 seconds Revell Spitfire, we're going to be basically looking at most of the rest of the build. Of course, we've done the cockpit in a previous video. If you haven't seen that, the link's in the description below. So we're going to be mainly looking at sort of building the wings and some of the conversion parts to make this into a Mark V. So without further ado, we'll get straight into it. The cockpit is installed and we've got the two halves of the fuselage together. So all that's we need to do now is sort of made a start on getting rid of some of the seam lines. I need to make a start on the front yet. So there's a few other things that we need to do as well, because I think Revell, even though they've done a good job on their detail, has gone slightly overboard. Now, so if you remember in the review, so they've done a lot of riveting, and I was looking at it and thought there seems to be quite a lot in certain areas. Now, as you can see here, I have marked out a lot of scribbles. I was distinctly remember looking at Spitfires, just thinking in general that there seems to be a hell of a lot of level of detail in this part than what actually should be there. So I've had a closer look at a few photos, and these rivets are actually there, but they're not as pronounced as Revell has made them. So, and this is quite a lot through most of the model. Certain ones, let me get some to point with. Some of these rivet lines here, top cross panels there, they are quite pronounced. Some of these other ones are slightly, of course the ones down here are as well. The ones on some of the panels for this one here for the radio, and the one on the other side are overly deep, and again as well as the ones on the front cowl and on the sides, and very particularly on the top. There is also a panel line there which I think even on the Mark I isn't there, but I'm going to double check that. I know I've put it down to fill, but I'm not 100% sure, so I'm going to have to do another look at this one in particular. But I think what I will end up doing is, through pretty much the rest of the model, I think I'm going to give it a light sanding overall. These ones in particular, this is on the radio compartments door there, I'm going to fill them in slightly, as well as the ones on the nose. So probably that there's still slightly there, but in some cases not so much. And so just give this a light sanding and see how that works out there. But before we go into any of that, so I'm going to give you a little couple of little sort of tips, I suppose, with getting rid of panel lines. Now, from the start, when you're putting the fuselage together, dry fit it, hold it together, maybe tape it, and try and make sure that the panel line, I'm on panel lines now, on the two parts of the fuselage, that they're as flush as possible. Now, it's not always the case, I know that, but try and get them as flush as possible, and then preferably use something like Tamier's extra thin or a very thin cement glue. Run it across the panel, and this will stick, seep through and adhere the two parts together. These are quite strong glue, so don't worry too much about them coming apart at any point. And then rather than using a knife, if you can get away with it, one of these. I forgot the proper name for them. These are very good for trying to clear some of these panel lines. So all you need to do is just, particularly with because it's only squared off, it's not sharp as such, and just basically just run it along, you know, your panel lines, seam lines, and with a bit of luck, as you can see in certain areas here, it has cleared it. Of course, it's got a curvature, so it's also very good for these sort of parts, because sometimes using straight edges or knives, you know, you tend to flatten out a curved area that obviously you don't want flat. What I also do after doing that is I use a watercolour marker. Now I use this to, as you can see I've done it here before, but I use it to run down the side, down the seam lines, and once that dries, I mean even when it's wet actually, but particularly once it dries, you will see how pronounced any seam lines are, and then you can work at either filling them or a bit more work at you know, trying to rub them out. Also, what's quite good with them is that before you come to painting, you can just rub it away, get it all over your hands, and you know, it's nice and clean, and then there's nothing between you know, the plastic of the model and putting paint on. So just in case you worry, and I do worry about it, you probably don't need to, but just in case it doesn't stick properly for whatever reason, it probably should anyway, but I like to clean this up and, you know, paint straight on top. I think it's better than you know, need to get in there, brush out all the oil, and you know, putting a spray down to see if that has cleared, you know, when you've been trying to rub out these seam lines. Although admittedly the paint potentially could fill some of these out anyway, but I like to use one of these watercolour markers, particularly preferably obviously black, because I seem to find that makes it stand out a little bit more. So what we'll do now is we'll get on to sorting these rivets out. So get the sanders out in the filler, I think, and we'll see how it looks in a minute. So here's a closer look at some of those rivet lines. Now it is very nice, they're very well done, but they're just too deep in some cases, and particularly the ones on the nose, they definitely need to be you know, dulled down a bit, or attempt to. So I'm going to start off with some Humbrol putty. Since using this stuff, I mean, I've been using it for a while, but I hate the stuff. I don't think it really works very well. So I'm going to get some of the Tamiya stuff. So I'm going to mix it with some of that Tamiya extra thin. Basically mush it up into a bit of a paste, and you know, get to a consistency that you're happy with. Does tend to stick to pretty much everything but what usually you want it to stick to. So we'll basically slap it on. Try not to put it on too thick if you can help it. It's not particularly easy not to, but you know, it's one of those things. So yes, we'll slap it on all over those rivet lines and into that seam that we want to get rid of. As you can see, I did slap it on a little bit too thick. So anyway, but with a bit of sanding, you know, we'll get that out, no problem. So as you can see here, I've had a couple of goes at it, eventually using a bit of paint to see if I've got those lines out. So we're going to move quickly on to the wings. So it says using that Tamiya extra thin glue. You know, it's great. You know, just attempt to clamp the wing, and you know, get it into the right position, and then just run a bit of glue down that seam, and it will stick. so now we're going to move on to actually starting to turn this into a Mark 5. So I've had to use a fairly chunky drill bit to get at least the majority of that original gun barrel out, and attempt to, you know, get that cannon barrel fitted in. I'll also apologise for the bad camera angles. I still need to actually sort of probably set this up a little bit better. I have tried to have it so it's out of my way, so I can see what I'm doing, but I don't always realise where the position of the camera is. But as you can see there, I'm still having to take a few chunks out to get this barrel to fit in. So once I've got that to about the right size for it to fit in, get the good old super duper glue out and put it onto it. I usually use a sewing needle, saves, you know, splodging it all over the place and making a right mess. I actually since had to reposition those because I actually need to cut the gun barrels down a little bit. So here we're moving on to trying to attempt to blank out some of these panels. I tape around the areas, basically keeping the mess to a minimum. Also, once I've filled it out, and when I come to sanding, it protects you know, some of the areas that are around it that, you know, we don't want to lose any detail out of. So I always find putting a bit of tape down, you know, sort of helps out a little bit. So actually, in the case of filling the panels out, I actually attempted to use a little bit of medi putty. It's a two-parter. Problem with this both, you get a coloured one. It's not coloured, is it? One's white, one's grey, which is a lot easier to mix in. But when you're using the white, you know, you need to take a bit of time mixing that together. So, you know, knead it together a little bit, pull it apart, put it together again, and with a bit like that, we'll sort of spread that out and, you know, make the mix right. So I get a tool to try and put some of this filler in to make it, you know, again, a little less messy, because I didn't actually bother taping around the gun barrels. You can also use water, which will help spread the stuff, but you've got to be a bit careful, because this will actually basically dissolve if you use too much water. So be very careful with that if you're gonna do that. Again, I'd overdid, and I thought I'll try and speed the process up and use a rotary tool with a diamond grinding bit, which, to be fair, this did help quite a bit, because medi putty, when it dries, it's quite solid stuff, so this helped out quite a lot, and eventually getting close down to the panel, I moved to I think it was a 240 grit sandpaper, and then a very, very light sanding pad. So you can see that has actually completely filled in the ejector slip. I did actually have to go over this another couple of times, you know, because I actually took too much out in certain areas. So it's a long process, but, you know, you get there in the end. So after giving it a bit of a final sanding, which I think I'm happy with, I'll go over with more marker again and see how that's all played out. And you can see I still need to do a little bit of work, but there you go, we'll keep going at it. So move on to the tailplane. As you can see, the elevators don't really fit the part. Now the reason behind this is obviously because this is built off a Mark 1 A kit. So what we need to do here is, you know, sort of, well, what I did was mark out where I needed to. And there we go. At the present moment, we've got basically. So we make Stuart has lent us this saw by JLC. Very nice, as you can see. It's a nice little saw. Actually, I've been thinking about getting one of these for a while, but Stuart very kindly lent me this so I could. So there you go, guys. It's looking pretty good. I know some of the, particularly the covers for the cannon on the top and bottom, they do sit a little bit prouder than they should be. I did try and thin them out a little bit, but I got a bit scared on thinning them too much and completely ruin them altogether. But I'm happy with it so far. It's going together really well. It's a really nice kit. So in the next video we'll obviously be looking at painting and all the weathering. I'm hoping to do this in one singular video rather than spreading it across another two. So yeah, so hopefully that'll be the full build, full painting, camouflage, you know, and this is the general weathering as well. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Also follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And as always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you again soon.